far, far away, I was thirsty.
Ding dong!
I have to read this story? This is so lame. I want to hear about your alcohol prohibition stories. Well, of course. It started in the 1920s.
Hey, you! Yeah, you. I bet you're wondering, what's gonna happen next?
What's happening?
Well, I'm gonna tell you. Imagine a world where all kinds of people were hitting that Henny. Or more scientifically, intoxicated. The alcohol prohibition of the 1920s was not easy. Imagine a world where people are passed out and litter the streets. Scary, right? Well, imagine you then decide to pinpoint the cause to a so-called poison that many people consume. You and many others decide to ban this poison. Problem fixed, right? Well, no, wrong. People begin making their own illegal versions and die from it. There are more arrests since people are smuggling the now illegal poison. There is also doubt that the law fixed the initial problem itself.
Well, all of that is basically what happened in 1920s when prohibition laws were passed in America. The passing of America's prohibition law in 1919 caused conflict amongst citizens and convicted a series of negative events. Eventually, in 1933, the American government compromised their position and repealed the amendment.
Now, back up. What's prohibition?
It is the forbidding by law of the manufacture, transportation, and sale of alcoholic liquors, except for medicinal and sacramental purposes.
Well, during the 1800s, alcohol was a major part of American life. Americans would even drink in the early morning. Many Americans also faced troubles with alcoholism. In 1830, it was estimated that consumptions were at 7 gallons a year. Many people, such as Reverend Lyman Beecher, would preach about the harms and evils of alcohol. Associations like the Anti-Saloon League also began to appear. It was also speculated whether alcoholism was harming work performance. Also during this time, crime was at a high, go figure, and corruption as well.
One of the major things that sparked prohibition laws being passed happened on December 10th, 1913, a whole 6 years before prohibition was even passed. On this day, members of the Women's Christian Temperance Union and the Anti-Saloon League participated in a march in Washington, D.C. They demanded that a prohibition amendment to be added to the U.S. Constitution. On paper, prohibition seemed like a solid plan. By banning the production of alcohol, one could assume that alcohol business would be put to an end. One could also assume that Americans would be decent human beings and follow the law. Because who would actively go against the law?
This was the thinking and logic that many people followed when they decided prohibition should be passed. And as history shows, that thinking was flawed and incorrect.
The moment alcohol prohibition passed, many alcohol consumers were outraged. However, there were obvious flaws in the law itself. People discovered a major loophole in this law. The law only banned the production of liquor, not the consumption.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, how you
I
doing?
got a quick and easy method on how to make some moonshine.
Oh, really now? Okay.
Follow me to find out how.
Do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
The first ingredient is a nice strong perfume. You don't want your wife to know about your alcohol problem. Douse this on for good measure. Your next ingredient is an old Motorola razor. I think this is gonna give your alcohol a good strong taste. Ferment the ingredients in the bathtub. Now my bathtub is dirty, but you see, I don't care about my own health.
Hey, do-si-do, your
ferment the
partner
ingredients
now.
for a long time. And eventually you'll have yourself
It ain't easy being a moonshiner. Woo-hoo.
Now, with alcohol outlawed, the government had no responsibility in monitoring what people drank, and alcohol bootleggers were far from being qualified and knowing what they were doing. This resulted in the death of thousands upon thousands of people. However, the effect of bootleggers was not seen until later when people ran out of their previously bought alcohol. After the government found out about citizens making their own alcohol, they actually put in the effort to poison some of the products so that people wouldn't be able to recreate it. It is estimated that more than 10,000 people died in correlation to Prohibition. Take into consideration that this law was only passed for 13 years.
Another factor Prohibition didn't take into mind was the black market. As stated, bootleggers were quite prominent. This resulted in increased sales in the black market.
One major flaw of Prohibition was the lack of defining technicalities. Certain drugstores sold alcohol as medicine. Said drugstores were allowed to sell a pint of hard liquor every day to patients. Not only that, some states refused to enforce it. If a state themselves won't enforce a law, no one from the state would follow it. There was nothing within the law punishing states for doing so.
All of the flaws of Prohibition eventually led to its end nationally in 1933. Mind you, the 18th Amendment is the first and only to be repealed. Prohibition's lack of addressing technicalities proved how laws may appear better on paper than when they are actually implemented. Prohibition, more importantly, sparked the questions in regards to what extent can the government control what citizens choose to consume.